Shadow Hack. Chapter 301, Thorny Problem. The first person to speak was S.H.A.D.W. Today, I found the opportunity to fight against Lu Qingxi. If I had gone all out, I could have settled the fight in 5 minutes. The number 1 halted fluxer didn't disappoint people. Even if Lu Qingxi was the most formidable person in Liujia village, S.H.A.D.W. had complete confidence in winning against him in a few minutes just after fighting him once. In the entire Liujia village, Lu Qingxi was the most powerful person, and also the only one worth entering their eyes, according to S.H.A.D.W.'s evaluation. Lu Qingxi's 8 oxen's power should be roughly equivalent to the strength required to clear the first test in the continental battle. In other words, given S.H.A.D.W.'s strength, if he went all out, the Black Dragon of the 9 Dragon Caves would also lose. Now, there was only one minor problem left: had Black Dragon cultivated any flux energy battle skills or not? Everyone had made some discreet inquiries, and based on what they heard, the enemy should also be an ordinary person. Yet they still couldn't rule out that the 9 leaders might have cultivated 1 or 2 low-level deadly flux energy skills. If this came to be true, it would make things relatively uncertain. It must be known that these native ordinary people had formidable bodies and their innate constitutions had undergone qualitative change triggered by their size. They not only possessed explosive power and terrifying offense, but also great endurance. If they cultivated 1 or 2 flux energy battle skills on top of that, then it wouldn't be just a 1 + 1 = 2 type of increase in their strength. Instead, they'd instantly become terrifying. All of the descenders believed that the bandit leaders shouldn't be without any trump cards, otherwise, how could they have intimidated all the villages in a 1,000-mile radius? If the opponent had learned some battle skills, then how certain would you be to win? Lanzi asked pensively. It's difficult to say. Given their physical strength, even if they had grasped only a shoddy killing technique, I would no longer be confident, S.H.A.D.W. answered after thinking for a moment and shaking his head. He then subconsciously glanced at Li Yunmu. His movement was naturally caught by everyone. Once they thought of Li Yunmu, they instantly realized why S.H.A.D.W. had honestly admitted that he had less than 5% chance to win. More than likely, he wasn't admitting that he wasn't a match for the 9 Dragon Caves head, but that he didn't have any method to deal with an opponent who had such formidable physical body and also possessed offensive battle skills. Sometimes, physical strength and endurance could also be a type of strength and ability. His attitude immediately caused people to become gloomy. From what the village elder said, the reason why the 9 heads of the 9 Dragon Cave have been enthusiastically capturing outsiders is because they want to obtain some things that they think we have, and those things are cultivation methods. As for the martial experts the village elder had mentioned who are just at the initial stage, this would also be the reason behind their appearance. They weren't real flux energy experts, else they wouldn't have to go through this much trouble just to capture people like us. Yet since they're capable of it, then instead of true flux energy users, they must be just somebody who had grasped some physical battle skills. Otherwise, the 9 Dragon Caves would have been exterminated by the fluxers who had come before us. If this fact could be confirmed, then it would also verify that part about Black Dragon, where they said that other dragon heads had the same strength as Lu Qingxi, but the difference between their battle prowess and Black Dragons was equivalent to difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, I suggest that none of us vainly deludes themselves into thinking that they can take care of those mountain bandits. Lanzi held the most authority at this time. This was because her power and prestige were the highest. She had come from the influential Ruyan clan of the higher dimensional continent, so everyone had accepted her as the brains of the group long ago. While being a woman, she had become the successor of an influential clan of higher dimensional continent, so all of them, including even people like Mantian and Hai Yu, had no choice but to accept that among all of them, she was the smartest. But if we don't deal with them, we won't have a way to reach the transfer channel. Coiling Tiger furrowed his brows deeply. The mention of the transfer channel caused everyone's heart to jump slightly. In fact, all the descenders present here were supported by some power from behind. Even Zhao Mei and Fan Kong, these so-called rogue fluxers, also had been forced to reveal their hands after coming out of the Dragon Corpse mountain jungle. No one believed that a person without any background could casually learn a technique like 7-point extinction stabbing technique. Those people who truly didn't have any power behind them and were representing no one were those who were forced to remain in the jungle to avoid the heavy gravity. Thus, everyone here had a trick or two hidden up their sleeve. Thus, everyone, including Li Yunmu, had a destination in their mind, and this destination was precisely their first target in this origin world. Li Yunmu clearly recalled that Battle Sage Jing had given him a location that he should go to, but he had heard from the villagers that Liujia village was almost 769,000 kilometers away from that location. Thus, he was currently in a predicament. The vastness of the origin world far surpassed everyone's imagination, and the 16 descenders had no other way of reaching their destinations besides using the 9 Dragon Caves transfer channel. There should also be a transfer channel at the town 2,000 miles away, but Li Yunmu and the others didn't dare to go there. They had no official identities and the people of the origin world there would be extremely formidable. With such problems, how could they dare even think of it? By now, everyone could see this. If they were asked to choose between the 9 Dragon Cave and the town, they could only choose the 9 Dragon Cave because only it provided them with any hope of success. Wrong, I only said that everyone shouldn't delude themselves into thinking that taking 9 Dragon Cave will be easy and not that we don't have any way to do so. I have a plan to deal with those bandits. Ruin Lanzi smiled faintly. Men Shen, this enormous human, didn't think much about it and directly asked, what way? The other descenders in the meantime narrowed their eyes. Ruin Lanzi really had many ambitions and was now clearly thinking of taking the initiative to grab the authority over this group. But right then, everyone really needed her experience, so most people wanted to hear what kind of plan she had devised. Chapter 302, Another Forbidden Weapon. It's simple, we just need to pull the snake from its hole. Ruin Lanzi knew that her trickery wasn't hidden from anybody, but as long as she achieved her aim, she didn't care. Blade Devil had left alone while the woman with a green snake and another descender from Dong clan, both of whom were from higher dimensional continent, had been forced to stay within the jungle because of the gravity. Thus, the higher dimensional continent's faction's power had suffered greatly. With only Ryuan Lanzi and Lu Buletin remaining behind, it was basically impossible for them to compete with other factions. This was why she wanted to show her worth and attract sufficient importance to her person. Pulling the snake out of the hole. Everyone seemed to have somewhat understood, but the exact plan was completely unfamiliar to the majority of the proud sons and daughters of heavens. They had simply never faced a circumstance where they'd need such a plan. Regardless of whatever the problem was, they would always come out on top. Even if they were unable to suppress it with their strength, it would be solved by their background. And some of this pride still remained in these people and subconsciously, they resisted using such tricks to settle the problem. But Ruin Lanzi's reminder quickly made them realize that this wasn't their world and that this was the only way to settle the problem. That's right, we should draw the snake out of its hole. Since we aren't completely certain of winning against them, we can only beat them in their own game. After drawing them out, we will kill them in one fell swoop, Ruin Lanzi supplemented. How do you plan to do it? Li Yunmu asked, showing some interest. Even if he was convinced that if everyone really went all out against the 9 Dragon Cave bandits, it would be very simple. That is, if they revealed their trump cards. Like if he revealed the 3 pieces of Azure Dragon deity suit or his world power, then he was sure he alone could deal with the 9 Dragon Cave's 9 heads. His principles were still the same, though. As long as the opponent didn't surpass Flux Master level or was unable to break past his defenses, it didn't make much of a difference if his opponent was a single person or an army. Li Yunmu was convinced that since he could accomplish that, then among the 16 people here, at least a few of them could achieve the same. However, no one was willing to reveal their trump cards and true strength. Even Zihanbei was also concealing many things. If this number one person of the fifth dimension went all out, then how was it possible that he would have a mere 5% possibility of prevailing over a group of mountain bandits? It was simply nonsense. If I'm not wrong, then the Nine Dragon Cave has already received information about us staying within the Lihugia village, Ruin Lanzi said. The Lihugia village has some hidden ears from the bandit side. Everyone quickly asked in response. That's right. Besides, according to my estimations, the position of the spy of the Nine Dragon Cave within Lihugia village should also be quite high. I even think that this spy is one of the 9 heads, since only then would they gain a proper estimate of our strength and thus think of methods to deal with us. Ruin Lanzi's words astonished people. Lu Qingshi. Everyone asked with slight astonishment. It is not him. Ruin Lanzi shook her head. If I haven't guessed wrong, then it should be the captain of the second hunting squad, since from the start, he was the person responsible for protecting Lihugia village. If any descenders come from the jungle, he would be among the first ones to know. Then is it possible that the entire Lihugia village is formed by members of the Nine Dragon Cave? Li Qinghong suddenly asked. It's possible, but I don't know for certain. But if this is really the case, then our situation isn't good, Ruin Lanzi solemnly said. Impossible, if the entire Lihugia village was formed by the people of Nine Dragon Cave, they wouldn't have provided us with the map and informed us about the Nine Dragon Cave's existence. Why would they superfluously alert the enemy? Lu Buletin said with discontent. What if they wanted to use the name of the Nine Dragon Cave to attract our attention and remove our vigilance against themselves? Ruin Lanzi suddenly said. Ruin Lanzi, you don't need to keep people in suspense. Just speak what you want from us, and we the barbarian brothers will listen to you. Coiling Tiger was a very impatient person, and the barbarians of the desolate continent in general disliked this sort of scheming very much, so he quickly declared his position. After Coiling Tiger displayed his group's stand, a small smile appeared on the face of Ruin Lanzi and she began to quickly explain her plan. According to her conjectures, she believed that behind the Nine Dragon Cave bandits, there wasn't any power which could send flux energy martial experts. The reason why the people of the Lihugia village had said so was mainly to add pressure and make sure that these descenders put their entire attention on the bandits, thus lowering their guard against the people of the village. With this, they wanted to cause chaos among the descenders before the fighting had even started. If this assumption was correct, then everything would become clear. It would also confirm that the bandits of the Nine Dragon Cave didn't have complete certainty of being able to deal with their group with their strength. They were simply exaggerating the facts while trying to use other methods like poisoning their food. Although this type of method was considered underhanded, but it was extremely effective and also suited the modus operandi of bandits. This could also explain why the people of Lihugia village had warned everyone about the existence of Nine Dragon Cave, not even hesitating to use the power of flux energy experts to scare them. They had only one aim, and that was to cause disorder among the group and lower their guard against themselves, the people of Lihugia village, by making sure that all their attention was focused on the Nine Dragon Cave. It has to be said that Ruin Lanzi's analysis was sufficient to cause everyone to become apprehensive, even if she said things without giving evidence. Once everyone thought carefully about this, they all felt that her words were correct. If she hadn't reminded them, then they might have really neglected the seemingly harmless villagers. Thus, everyone should be extremely careful about one thing since the enemy has already made plans for us, we cannot alert them in the slightest. We will use their own arrangements to beat them at their game. Naturally, we also need to make some proper arrangements to guard against the unexpected. Yes. Everyone leisurely agreed, and all the descenders were once again reminded that this wasn't their world. In their world, when would such group as theirs, consisting of only proud sons and daughters of heavens, would act so passively against a trifling village and a couple bandits? On that night, everyone made their own arrangements. Li Yunmu took out his 4 runic spears. It wasn't a secret that he possessed these 4 forbidden tools, and so he didn't need to worry about revealing this trump card. Hai Yu didn't fall behind. She took out a bottle of liquid called Underworld Ocean Liquid, which was an extremely terrifying poison extracted from a flower that lived in the underworld ocean. For any person with strength lower than Nirvana stage, this poison was deadly. Zhang Huiya also took out one of the 10 forbidden weapons, the one named Nine Devil Parasite Cannon. It could be expected that the moment he did so, everyone's cautiousness towards him increased by a few times. If it wasn't for the enemy this time, the amount of power he possessed would have remained a mystery. He certainly wouldn't have just revealed this sort of forbidden weapon. From this, the power of several trump cards prepared for these descenders with the transcending powers behind them could be clearly seen, and this was the reason why Li Yunmu had remained low-key. The unknown is the most terrifying. It wasn't yet the time for him to steal the limelight. He had no doubts that with the assistance of the system, he would be able to establish his foothold in this origin world and become a dragon among men. What upper-tier sects or sages or transcending power? In the future, none of them would be unable to stop his rise. Chapter 303, The Change in Role. Everyone secretly remained on guard for the whole night, but nothing happened. Just as Ruin Lanzi had predicted, it was really a trap with poison. At dawn, the village elder sent a woman to deliver breakfast for everyone, which included a soup made from meat and freshly plucked herbs and 2 large hot steamed buns. Such a simple but freshly prepared food was like a lavishly prepared feast for these descenders who had been traveling through the mountain ranges for several days. If not for Ruin Lanzi's warning, maybe Li Yunmu himself wouldn't have been able to stop himself from taking a bite. But now, everyone resisted the enticement. They secretly threw away the food and pretended to want to eat more. Sure enough, before long, a wave of rumbling sounds came from outside the village. All of the descended walked of the house to take a look and saw a group of extremely savage men with fiendish expressions on their faces stepping down from a tyrannical monster. Haha, I heard that yesterday another group of outsiders came. Moreover, there were many of them. The group was made up of 5 people. When Li Yunmu and the others looked at them, they could clearly sense an air of cruelty around them, which far surpassed that of the hunting squad of Liujia village. Presumably, these were 5 of the 9 heads of the 9 Dragon Cave. Yet, there are 16 people in total. This time we have caught a large fish, none of them seem weak. At this time, Lu Qingxi, who had appeared to be extremely honest previously, moved forward to welcome them with a smile. Old 7, you really have some motherfuck *ing good luck. If they had come just a few days earlier, I would have been the one to get this huge windfall, one of the 5 heads said indignantly. After entering the village, they greeted the people of Liujia village casually while completely disregarding the existence of the descenders. Once the descenders witnessed this scene, all of them shouted out lucky inwardly. Fortunately, Ruin Lanzi had seen through the Liujia villagers, otherwise, they really would have fallen into this huge trap. You lot, if you act obediently, then you will suffer a lot less. Don't try to play any tricks, all of you are coming with me. The person who appeared like the main boss was probably the 2nd head of the 9 Dragon Cave. The white dragon tattoo on the left side of his face basically confirmed this point. Hearing those words, Mammoth Barbarian Wahang laughed in anger. It's really a sinister village. But do you think that just by relying on a few dozen people you'll be able to capture us? The 2nd head, White Dragon, narrowed his eyes and said, Seems like this group of pigs is quite intelligent, they surprisingly had known about our group. After the 9 Dragon Cave had obtained information that a group of descenders this time lacked neither in numbers nor in strength, they had dispatched many people. 5 dragon heads had come, so together with Old 7 and Old 8 who were already hiding within Liujia village, there were 7 out of 9 heads present. This coupled together with half of the troops of 9 Dragon Cave which they had brought with them rose their total number of fighters to 70. Among them, there were 20 elites of the 9 Dragon Cave, all of whom had a strength of 6 oxen or higher. It could be said that 9 Dragon Cave's arrangements were absolutely watertight. Even if the opponents hadn't been poisoned, they still had full confidence in capturing them. However, the price they would have to pay would increase exponentially now. Don't worry, they won't be able to jump around for long. With our constituent endurance pill, these pampered people with bodies as weak as fowl will be only sitting ducks, the leader of the second hunting squad Lu Chuan said with a sinister smile. That's right, he was the old 8 of the 9 Dragon Cave, the 8th head. Ruin Lanzi's analysis had been conservative. Not only Lu Chuan, even Lu Qingxi as well as all the other strong men of the hunting squads were surprisingly a part of the 9 Dragon Caves band. Only the weak ones in the village, like the women and the children, were authentic villagers. Clearly, as long as there was any male in the village who showed the slightest hint of rebelling, he would be killed. No wonder then that yesterday when Li Yunmu entered the village, he saw no liveliness in the eyes of the weak women and children. Initially, he believed that it was because the lives of the natives of the origin world were extremely difficult and thus they didn't seem to have any hope for their future. But now, it was clear that this wasn't the case. The entire Liujia village had been under the control of the bandit fiends for a long time. When the women of the village saw what was about to happen, they led the children to the side like robots. They didn't dare to do or say anything, just stand indifferently and watch what was about to unfold. At this time, Li Yunmu suddenly said, "I heard that your 9 Dragon Cave has a transfer channel." "That's right, our 9 Dragon Cave naturally has a transfer channel, this information is completely true. Otherwise, how would all of you have fallen into our trap?" A hint of hesitation appeared on the face of the second head, White Dragon. "Since this is true, then we are relieved." Zhang Wei coldly raised his hand, and ruthlessly waved it. After learning that 9 Dragon Cave really had a transfer channel, their minds were no longer on the present. They felt no need to speak even a single word to these degenerates. In the eyes of these heavenly talents, these bandits were trash. Even if it appeared that they had sufficient strength to endanger the safety of the descenders, they didn't really put the bandits into their eyes. Once Zhang Wei waved his hand, the 2 types of forbidden weapons installed in the village secretly revealed their formidable ability. The first major change was caused by 4 whistling sounds which came from the rear mountain. This sound had just rang out, but the 4 9 Dragon Cave heads, including the second head, were blown away by an enormous force. But the attack wasn't over with this. Incidentally, the force attack also hit the entire group of bandits standing behind the leaders. Just one attack of 4 runic spears had instantly killed 4 heads, including the second head. The group of bandits which was begging to be attacked by standing behind the 4 heads were skewered on the 3-meter-long runic spear like barbecue pieces on a grilling stick. This was the power of the forbidden weapon ranked 3rd among the 10 deadly forbidden weapons on Earth. Even if these people lived in this powerful origin world, they were still easily crushed. A bunch of trash. Man Tian shook his head slightly. It couldn't be denied that because of the harsh environment, the bodies of these natives were extremely terrifying, especially those of the head bandits whose strength reached the power of 8 or 9 oxen. The attack power of their one punch was certainly not less than 10 tons. If they had also cultivated some skills to boost their power, their one punch could have displayed a terrifying strength of several tons, which was really extraordinary. It should be known that this was equivalent to the force of a freight train moving at the speed of 60 to 70 km/h. If the power of these people's legs was also considered, then their one kick's power could certainly reach several tens of tons. This was extremely frightening and also the biggest worry for the descenders. After all, not all of them possessed terrifying flesh and had absolute defense like Li Yunmu. For example, women, like Hai Yu, possessed superior strength, but if her opponents attacked her in a group and managed to land a kick, then even if she could defeat them, she would still be unable to endure the formidable might of that one kick. However, the lowest rung natives were indeed at the lowest level. They hadn't opened their celestial points to strengthen their brain. Thus, when confronted with the runic spears, this sort of formidable deadly weapon, they were like practice targets. As for the descenders who had prepared for a long time for this, how could they falter at this point? Following the first wave of attack, the 9 Devil Parasite cannon was also used. At this instant, everyone including Li Yunmu finally experienced the terrifying might of the forbidden weapon ranked second among the 10 great forbidden weapons. That's right, the danger grade of the 9 Devil Parasite Cannon was higher than that of Li Yunmu's runic spears. This was because it could cause massive harm during war. Chapter 304, Devil Crocodile Beetle. After the runic spears displayed their formidable might, the 8-9 Devil Parasite Cannons which had been established at the rear of the mountain long ago also roared to life. Bang, 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 bang. After that, 8 continuous heavy sounds echoed from the accurately bombarded group of 70-something bandits. The next instant, a thick green gas liquid spread around the bandits. A blood-curdling echoed in Li Yunmu's ears. The 8-9 Devil Parasite Cannons didn't attack using ordinary artillery shells, but used different sorts of parasite beetle eggs. Each of these parasite beetle eggs was as large as a football ball. When they exploded among the group of bandits, a large number of densely packed parasite beetles and thick green liquid appeared. As long as a bandit got infected by this green liquid, the parasite beetles would crawl up their body from head to toe in no time. Afterwards, those parasite beetles would rip apart the person's skin and enter their flesh. One after another, blood-curdling screams of the miserable people entered the ears of the descenders. The parasite beetles were quickly entering their victims' flesh and began laying eggs. Soon, the parasite beetles began to breed using the flesh of the bandits as their nest. Countless batches of newly born parasite beetles then crawled out of the dead bodies, their numbers reaching several tens of thousands. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbstruck. This was everyone's first time seeing the offensive power of the 9 Devil Parasite Cannon. No wonder it was ranked second among the 10 great forbidden weapons. These parasite cannons would be way too hazardous in a large-scale war. In a blink of an eye, the bandits of the 9 Dragon Cave were completely wiped out, and several tens of thousands of newly born parasite beetles covered their bodies. Even those bandits who hadn't died yet were eaten by the tens of thousands of parasite beetles in less than a few minutes, leaving behind only a pile of bones. What kind of fiendish insect is this? A hint of fear flashed on Zhao Mei's face, and other descenders also looked at Zhang Huiyan with slight concern. Zhang Huiyan had had an ulterior motive for taking out the 9 Devil Parasite Cannons at this time. He wanted to display the terrifying methods of War God Temple to his fellow descenders to intimidate them. By this time, Liujia village's hunting squad together with Lu Qingxi and Lu Chuan had managed to react with fear-filled hearts. This sort of unprecedentedly terrifying method had completely frightened these natives. Capture them! A shining treasure bead appeared in Zhang Huiyan's hands. One after other, several rays of green-colored light shot out from the treasure bead, which seemed to have control over the newly born parasite beetles. Due to his orders, the bandits from the hunting squad of Liujia village followed their companions. The numerous parasite beetles began crawling over their bodies, and even Lu Chuan, who was the 8th head, was turned into a pile of bones after being eaten. Ruyan Lanzi wrinkled her brows and couldn't resist saying, "This is too cruel." Zhang Huiyan remained unmoved and coldly said, "Cruel? If I hadn't used this method, then how could we have quickly settled this group of bandits and stopped them from calling for any reinforcements?" The only person left alive was Lu Qingxi, who was surrounded by the group of parasite beetles. Zhang Huiyan walked forward in large strides and subdued him. "All right, more than half of the forces of the 9 Dragon Cave have been vanquished. Now is the best time for us to capture the transfer channel." No one had expected that the 8-9 Devil Parasite Cannons would turn out to be so terrifying. They had thought it would be a terrifying battle, but now it was quickly settled by the group of parasite beetles. At this time, Man Tian and the others appeared from behind them, revealing that they had already dealt with the troublesome matters. "Yes, we have dealt with the elderly, women, and children as well. Let's go now." "You killed them?" Hai Yu asked with a slight frown. Man Tian seemed to care about Hai Yu's feelings and hurriedly replied, "No, they're just unconscious. They won't awaken until we reach the 9 Dragon Cave." After this, Everyone swiftly departed to kill their way through the 9-dragon cave. By this time, Li Yunmu had obtained sufficient information about the 9-devil parasite cannon from the data gathered by the system. When he quickly glanced through it, he took in a deep breath. 9-devil parasite cannon had 9 types of parasite beetles. Just now, Zhang Wei had used only one type of parasite beetle, crocodile beetle, and nothing more. Apart from this, there were still 8 types of devil beetles left, and each of them was just as terrifying. Each kind had its respective strength and unique ability. The parasite beetles had one common characteristic, which was that they feasted upon flesh and blood. As long as they had sufficient supply of flesh, they would breed continuously. The rate of breeding would depend upon the parasite beetle's quality. On the basis of quality, the parasite beetles were divided into worker beetle, soldier beetle, king beetle, emperor beetle, and mother beetle. The higher quality parasite beetles were shot from the cannons, the more they would breed. For example, the highest quality of parasite beetle, mother beetle, could breed 5 times as long as the supply of flesh was ensured. The beetle numbers would then expand greatly, and they would quickly attain the terrifying amount of 10 billion parasite beetles. Just one mother beetle shot from 9-devil parasite cannon could cause millions of casualties on a battlefield without any major energy consumption. This was the reason why the 9-devil parasite beetle cannon was rated as the second most deadly forbidden weapon. It was exceptionally terrifying. Fortunately, the humans currently didn't possess the ability to control mother beetles, otherwise, it would have been a total catastrophe. The parasite beetles used by Zhang Wei were the lowest worker beetles who could breed only once. The parasite insects which appeared after breeding would also be worker beetles. Each of them was the size of a fist and their life was extremely short, they could only exist for 5 minutes. Sure enough, before a lot of time passed, the tens of thousands of crocodile beetles under the control of Zhang Wei died. But even so, all the descenders understood well that the war god temple had prepared terrifying reserves for Zhang Wei and Ji Wuxin. At this time, Ji Wuxin appeared at Li Yunmu's side and softly said, "Do you now understand the meaning of the words I spoke previously? You still have the time to reconsider your decision regarding joining my war god temple. They aren't able to harm me, regardless of how numerous they are. Unless they can get past my defense, they are useless." Although Li Yunmu was quite startled by the offensive power of 9-devil parasite cannon, he couldn't be that easily intimidated by the other party. Although asking me to enter war god temple isn't impossible, the action loses meaning if you are the only one asking. All this talk then is just nonsense. Li Yunmu smiled faintly, startling Ji Wuxin. It couldn't be denied that Li Yunmu's one sentence was ruthless. In one move, he had directly struck at the sore point in Ji Wuxin's heart. He could clearly see that regardless of whether it was Zhang Wei or Ji Wuxin, neither of them completely represented war god temple. They instead acted as restrictions on each other, carefully engineered by war god temple. Thus, Zhang Wei was the restriction who brought anxiety to Ji Wuxin's heart. As long as he existed, she couldn't act as she pleased and couldn't obtain complete grasp of all the resources of the war god temple. It was the same for Zhang Wei as well. Ji Wuxin was a restriction placed upon him by war god temple. Don't worry, there will be a day when you will see that I'm the only representative of war god temple. At the instant Zhang Wei turned around, Ji Wuxin quickly withdrew her gaze and moved away from Li Yunmu's side after dropping her sentence. Chapter 305, Smuggling the Ape Gods. Within the void of the heavenly world, the two followers gazed at the enormous ship flying in the sky in the distance, and Demon was filled with admiration towards the remarkable methods which his master possessed. Who could have expected that by relying on his own heavenly world, Li Yunmu would be able to forcefully bring 350 ape gods from Earth to Origin World? Naturally, achieving this feat wasn't the least bit simple. First of all, the strength of ape gods definitely couldn't surpass Flux Master Layer, otherwise, it would create problems when traversing through the descender channel. Even if the heavenly world was cut off from the outer world, the great strength contained within it would bring out rejection from the laws of the origin world while passing through the passage. This conflict would create enormous chaos in the space. If one was to say it more simply, the channel might collapse, washing away all the descenders into the hyper-chaotic space. The point to protect against it was shackles. Li Yunmu not only used his world power to completely shackle the energy within the 350 ape gods, but he also had a useful tool at his disposal. This tool was precisely one of the 3 transcending sage tools of the Tower of Glory, the Void Disk. The ability of the Void Disk left behind by the Flux ancestor wasn't limited to just breaking through all restrictions and formations as everyone had previously imagined. It could also reverse the void and create restrictions on all living things. But with Li Yunmu's low cultivation, wanting to display the full restricting power of the Void Disk was nothing more than a pipe dream. Using his full strength, he could at most achieve the restriction for extremely short time like he had done with Devil and nothing more. But this time, the circumstances under which he was using the Void Disk were completely different. Right then, he had placed shackles on the ape gods within his heavenly world. There, he could utilize 10 times more world power and use the full power of Void Disk to place shackles upon the energy and presence of ape gods. Thus, using the restrictions and independent space as well as given the fact that ape gods weren't very formidable, Li Yunmu had summoned the courage to take the gamble. He had successfully grabbed this small loophole while descending from Earth to the origin world. At this moment, Li Yunmu used the entire world power of his heavenly world to remove the shackles on all the ape gods. After being in the origin world for half a year, he could already confirm that his method wouldn't attract the world punishment of the origin world. This was because the upper limit of the laws governing the origin world were too high. His group of ape gods hadn't fully matured, and although the strength of their flesh was greater than that of the natives, it shouldn't summon the world punishment from the origin world. Despite being fully confident in this conjecture, Li Yunmu was still extremely cautious. He slowly probed the upper limit which the origin world could bear. As he poured his world power into the Void Disk in his heavenly world, he first removed the shackles on a few ape gods and released them. The first batch included only 10 ape gods. The nerves of the 3 were stretched taut. Only after a moment passed and there was still no change in the origin world did they release a sigh of relief. Li Qinghong and Demon looked at each other with excitement on their faces. Their master had succeeded in the first step. Following this was the second step. The second step was to release the second layer of shackles from the 10 ape gods, and so Li Yunmu removed the world power restricting the bodies of the ape gods. Instantly, they began to slowly recover their suppressed vitality. At this instant, the 3 of them looked at the ape gods. After half-year had passed since they came to Origin World, this was Li Yunmu's first experiment. From ordinary crystal to black crystal layer, then to silver crystal layer which was followed by golden crystal layer and finally the rainbow crystal limit, the apes advanced. Ka-cha! Suddenly, in the void above the heavenly world, large thunder chains appeared, followed by an accumulation of cyan-colored thunder clouds. It's bad, even if we use all sorts of methods, we still attracted the world punishment. Li Yunmu was startled. He hurriedly used his world power again and quickly placed shackles on 4 of the 10 ape gods. When the 4 ape gods which had recovered their vitality completely were shackled again, the cyan thunder cloud which had barely condensed in the sky stopped growing. But this sort of heavenly might couldn't be tested. Even if it was deep within the void of the heavenly world, it still caused Li Yunmu and other 2 people to feel fear and trepidation. Li Yunmu was just courting disaster here. At this moment, he was trying to use his minor tricks to grasp the upper limit which the space between Origin World and Earth could support. If the hole became big enough to trigger a response from the Origin World, then it would certainly result in them being struck by the thunderous might and extinguished, turning even Li Yunmu to dust. But if the hole was small enough and didn't trigger any response from the will of the Origin World, then as long as he was extremely careful and succeeded, then the influence of this opportunity would be extremely large. And sure enough, when Li Yunmu shackled the vitality of the 4 ape gods once again, the thunder cloud formed at the extremity of the heavenly world finally began to calm down. Yet it was still far from scattering away. For the first time, Li Yunmu's group felt that the origin world's laws were extremely formidable. Even if they were inside his heavenly world, they still couldn't escape from the origin world's world punishment. Still not enough, cut 4 of their limbs. Li Yunmu looked at the tribulation cloud which was still gathered within his heavenly world. He clenched his teeth and promptly ordered. After receiving instructions, Li Qinghong and Demon immediately moved. They rushed forwards and swiftly acted. Their blades flashed and 4 limbs of the remaining 6 ape gods were swiftly removed. Instantly, the 6 ape gods lost more than half of their vitality and began to howl madly because of the pain. Large amount of blood gushed out from their wounds and fell on the ground. If the soul imprints of these ape gods hadn't been branded within the heavenly world and they hadn't acknowledged Li Yunmu as their master long ago, these savage beasts probably would have revolted and attacked him that very instant. But the Cyan Thunder Tribulation Cloud seemed to have a consciousness of its own. Regardless of whatever method Li Yunmu used, from the beginning to end, it was looking at the ape gods as external object and didn't scatter. A hint of ruthlessness appeared on Demon's face. He turned towards Li Yunmu and asked, "Should we continue with chopping their limbs?" After swallowing the divine blood, the ape gods had awakened their innate bloodline and had grown 6 limbs. Under present circumstances, their vitality could still be weakened. Although their hands and legs had been chopped off, they could regrow their limbs with their ability to recover as long as their brain or main body weren't injured. Chapter 306, Resistance. Li Yunmu decisively shook his head and refuted Demon's suggestion, "That won't do. If we chop more of their limbs, it is highly possible that their innate bloodline which they had awakened with so much difficulty will degenerate. So we definitely cannot chop off more of their limbs." Li Yunmu thought for a long time about this. If after squandering so much time and taking such large risks we could only smuggle in a bunch of ordinary ape gods to the origin world, what would have been the point? It must be known that the limit of potential for the 4-limbed ordinary ape gods was the peak of the 5th dimension. Regardless of whatever they cultivated, because of the restriction of their innate bloodline, they would never be able to rise to the 6th dimension and cross to the level of humanity's flux masters. But this group of 6-limbed ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline were completely different. After awakening, they had the potential to rise to the nirvana layer as long as they cultivated a cultivation method suitable for them. They would be only half a step away from the realm of flux sage. If Li Yunmu could obtain more divine blood from the king's true territory and nurture them, there was even a possibility of them evolving to the next stage and turning into 8-limbed ape ancestors. The tribulation is gonna start now. Demon's forehead filled with sweat. If the world punishment descended, then not only the 6 ape gods would suffer, but even Li Yunmu, who was the mastermind of the whole thing, would be unable to escape. He may even suffer a heavier punishment. Li Yunmu remained unmoved and transmitted his command. "Then we can only endure, immediately launch Plan B." "Master, this is extremely risky." At this time, Li Qinghong, who hadn't said a word from start, was also alarmed by Li Yunmu's decision to endure the world punishment. "I've already decided. If I can't even resist against this lowest level of world punishment, then what did I descend for?" he said resolutely. If he was in the 5th dimension and used a power which surpassed its limit, he wouldn't dare to think of it, let alone consider resisting it. This was because the world punishment of the 5th dimension had only one intent, and that was to use the strength of the entire world to destroy the person who broke the rules. This intent was very strict, like one of a machine carrying out orders to kill someone. Once it was triggered, the heavens of the 5th dimension would move to exterminate the rule breaker. This was the reason why even the peak existences like battle sages wouldn't have the courage to enter the 5th dimension. After all, even if the formidable battle sages were much more powerful, they still couldn't be more powerful than an entire dimension. But with his half-year's experience as well as the system's in-depth analysis, Li Yunmu had discovered that there was a large difference between the world punishment of the origin world and one on Earth. This difference was between their intents. The world punishment of the origin world was separated into 9 grades, as analyzed by the system. Before he had chopped off the limbs of the ape gods, the cyan-colored thundercloud had been 2nd grade. Despite it being only 2nd grade, Li Yunmu didn't have any method to resist it, because the power of the world punishment of the origin world was far more terrifying compared to one of the 5th dimension. But now, once the vitality of the ape gods had declined because of their chopped limbs, the thunder tribulation was of the lowest level. Because of this, Li Yunmu had a certain amount of confidence to be able to withstand it. This sort of terrifying risk would probably be the courting of death to the point of even 10 lives being insufficient for the other descenders, but Li Yunmu was different from them. After all, he possessed the formidable defense formed of 6 layers, and he also had the reincarnation tree. This was his most important capital, which gave him the confidence to be able to survive through the tribulation. Sensing Li Yunmu's determination, the 2 followers didn't speak anymore and immediately threw 6 items toward the 6 ape gods. With one glance, it could be ascertained that these were the 6 flags of the Great Sun Killing spell which Li Yunmu had obtained from the 6 elite disciples of H.A.C.K. The 6 ape gods had clearly cultivated H.A.C.K's secret technique with the help of the cultivation relaying globes prepared by Li Yunmu and possessed Sun God flame energy within their bodies. In addition, they had awakened their innate bloodlines, so they could clearly achieve more compared to humans with identical amount of effort. This was another reason for Li Yunmu's confidence. He wanted to use the ape god's killing spell as foundation, which formed the first line of defense against the cyan-colored thunder cloud. For this event, the system and Li Yunmu had prepared for a long time. The 6 ape gods didn't disappoint him. They quickly collected the spell flags and immediately inserted them into the ground. Then, they began to pour the Sun God flame energy. They instantly moved the 6 5th dimension treasure tools, and 6 void mirrors immediately appeared on the ground. With effort, they then were slowly turned towards the sky. But this wasn't sufficient. The spell still lacked one more thing, and it was the sun. In the heavenly world, they were unable to utilize the energy of the fixed sun, but at this time, Li Yunmu, who was at the center, looked upwards and howled loudly. As he opened his mouth, a red sun rose up from inside him. Although this red sun was small and had far less energy compared to the fixed sun in the heavenly world, it was extremely pure because it had reached a minor threshold and had been refined countless times by extremely pure energy. The red sun spit out by Li Yunmu instantly congealed a pure and majestic heat energy. Great Sun Killing Spell, success. Because of Li Yunmu's red sun being used as the core, this time's Great Sun Killing Array was even more formidable compared to the one unleashed by Flame Devil, Flowing Cloud, and the others. As if sensing the resistance from the rule breaker underneath, the Cyan Thunder Cloud, which hadn't scattered yet, became furious. The next instant, the Cyan Thunder Cloud grew without restraint, and a lightning bolt which was about the size of a child's arm condensed. It was flickering violently, dazzling the entire heavenly world. Ka-cha! Bang! The lightning bolt suddenly struck toward Li Yunmu. Right then, the 6 ape gods seemed to have sensed the danger and howled violently. They absorbed as much heat energy as they could from the red sun and poured in the flame energy from their bodies to form 6 blazing light rays which shot toward the heavens. Instantly, the 6 blazing rays and thunder tribulation collided, shaking the entire heavenly world. The world punishment was surprisingly forcefully scattered. Li Qinghong and Demon, who had already retreated a good distance away, watched this scene attentively. Once they saw the lightning dissipate, they breathed a sigh of relief. But soon, their expressions changed. Because the world punishment of the origin world wasn't finished yet. The cyan-colored thunder cloud above the heavenly world quickly congealed another lightning bolt which was even thicker and more ferocious compared to the previous one and struck down. The second lightning bolt was 3 times more formidable than the first one. Come again! Li Yunmu howled loudly. Instantly, the 6 void mirrors shot 6 more blazing rays at the second lightning bolt. Chapter 307, Unparalleled Major Reversal. However, as soon as they disrupted the second bolt and scattered it, the third one had already struck down. Bang! The green grass on the ground of the heavenly world, which had already grown several fingers high, was completely crushed by the shockwaves from the explosion. The small fountainhead at the center of the heavenly world seemed to have become immune to Earth's gravity. The spring water suddenly rose several tens of meters high like a fountain breaking out. Li Qinghong and Demon, who were acting as spectators, were forced to retreat by the enormous vibrating shockwaves created by the collision. Li Yunmu's complexion changed. The system wasn't omnipotent. Although it had done countless in-depth analysis, it had still calculated one thing wrong about the world punishment of the origin world. This mistake was that the system had underestimated the adaptability of the will of the origin world. Because of Li Yunmu's resistance, the world punishment had become increasingly more dangerous, like a furious man who was getting more and more enraged. But this wasn't the time to think about these issues, for the fourth thunderbolt was already descending. The 6 ape gods couldn't persevere anymore. Not only had they poured out the purest flame energy from the red sun into the 6 void mirrors, but they had also completely used up their flame energy. Since they were savage beasts, their intuition regarding danger was even sharper than that of humans. They were aware that if they couldn't resist the fourth thunderbolt, then they could only pay with their lives. Without needing Li Yunmu to remind them, they exchanged blows directly with the fourth thunderbolt. Because of the collision between the killing array and the tribulation thunder, cracks appeared at the edges of Li Yunmu's heavenly world. It began to rupture like a piece of glass all around, and the space within became unstable. This was a sign that this heavenly world was about to be forcibly crushed. If heavenly world was forced open, then everyone in it, including the ape gods, would be finished. At this time, the only fixed sun of the heavenly world suddenly began to shine brightly. Its splendor illuminated the entire heavenly world. Suddenly, the ruptured heavenly world began to be forcefully repaired. This was the ability of the congealed sun. Even if only one had been congealed, it was still able to stabilize Li Yunmu's heavenly world. The fifth tribulation descended. Ka-cha! Because of the thunderbolt, more than half of the sky was brightened up as if it was daytime. At that moment, the 6 blazing rays couldn't hold on anymore. They fused together but couldn't completely stop this attack. The remaining thunder then heavily crashed down on the great sun-killing array. Crack, 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 crack. The 6 void mirrors shattered. They were crushed into pieces by the thunder tribulation, and the 6 ape gods madly coughed up blood as they lost consciousness. The 7th tribulation bolt was even more terrifying than the previous ones. When it descended, Li Yunmu, who had already lost all his defenses and stood at the center of the spell, could only urge the red sun to go upwards. Bang! The red sun collapsed because of the tribulation thunder. Numerous blazing heat waves and thunder sparks violently shot in all directions in the heavenly world. But Li Yunmu was able to use his red sun to forcibly resist the 7th tribulation bolt. However, the will of the origin world didn't seem to want him to catch a breath. The 8th tribulation had already stored enough power within the tribulation cloud. This thunderbolt, which was even more terrifying and was around a thigh's thickness, violently descended. Instantly safeguard, Admiralty cover, 12 Rainbow Light Ghost King armor, Tyrant body, Devil Dragon bone armor. All these 5 layers of defense were fully activated by Li Yunmu. Bang! This time, there was no other power used to withstand it, but Li Yunmu's own body. He used it alone to forcefully endure the 8 tribulation. If the other descenders became aware of this, they would go mad. Regardless of whatever they thought, they would have never anticipated that a Flux disciple would surprisingly dare to use his own body to accomplish such an insane feat. But Li Yunmu had attempted to do this because he had the capital to back it up. He relied mostly on Admiralty cover, the damage-reducing defensive cultivation method. Otherwise, even if he had 10 times the guts, he still wouldn't have dared to court disaster like this. But even so, the might of the 8th tribulation bolt was even more terrifying and dreadful than those of the previous 7 added together. As this thick thunderbolt fell on Li Yunmu's body, its power was reduced by nearly 80% because of Admiralty cover and safeguard. Still, the King Crystal armor which had fused with Dark Golden Ghost King armor and the armor of a 12 Rainbow Light Ghost King weren't able to resist the leftover power of the Tribulation Thunder. Immediately, it disintegrated into pieces. The remaining thunder power then knocked against his tyrant body and Devil Dragon bone armor. At this moment, regardless of whether it was his muscles or bones, all of them began to rupture because of the tyrannical tribulation power. His body began to collapse inch by inch, his blood vessels ruptured, his bones began to crack, and even his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were ruined by the tribulation thunder. Li Qinghong and Demon who were watching Li Yunmu from the distance saw him becoming all bloody, like he was made of porcelain and was now rupturing bit by bit. Their master finally couldn't persevere against the world punishment of the origin world and fell back at the final step. Li Yunmu was finished, and Li Qinghong and Demon understood that they were finished as well. Everything was over. Unwilling, they were completely unwilling. They had barely descended into the origin world, so both high heavens and deep seas were waiting for them. Yet because of the failure of this matter, their hopes were forced to die. However, just when the two followers sensed Li Yunmu's vitality weakening, a muffled cry rang out from the center of the spell, "Major reversal." Just as the words were voiced, a terrifying green light was emitted by Li Yunmu's body, which was crumbling bit by bit, and an enormous amount of vitality burst forth. As the green light fell on the quickly crumbling body, a miracle happened. In one breath, Li Yunmu's body was restored completely. In the second breath, his body was no longer covered in blood. In the third breath, his energy was restored to its peak. What is called an SSS grade supreme technique. This is minor reversal could heal major injuries, while major reversal could reverse the situation as long as his brain was intact and his soul hadn't scattered. This was Li Yunmu's genuine trump card. Apart from Admiralty cover which was a uniquely tyrannical damage-reducing defensive skill, he also had this supreme great reversal technique. Even compared to Li Qinghong's undying sage blood, it was much more formidable and tyrannical. As long as Li Yunmu had stored sufficient vitality, he wouldn't die. Even his followers like Li Qinghong hadn't know about this trump card. Thus, for them, what was happening at this moment was simply a miracle. The world punishment of the origin world was far less strict than the fifth dimension's world punishment. After the 8 tribulation bolt, the thunder cloud had slowly started to scatter after sensing that Li Yunmu's life was about to be extinguished. However, the thunder cloud sensed that the person it had punished had recovered and burst forth with even more formidable vitality, so it instantly became furious. This time, the thunder cloud removed all restraints and condensed an incomparably enormous thunderbolt. When this 9th thunderbolt was congealed, the thunder cloud above the heavenly world dissipated completely. This was because it had used up all of its tribulation thunder to congeal this last strike. Chapter 308, The Transformation of the Great Sun. Ka-cha bang! This time, it was the final strike of the origin world's world punishment, which had vowed to extinguish the person who had broken the rules of the world, and it contained all of its power. Li Yunmu, whose vitality had been restored to the peak, suddenly stretched his both hands slowly. The next instant, his both hands were covered by azure gauntlets, which were covered in dragon scales. At the wrists, there were 2 dragon heads with their bloody mouths wide open. An azure pearl was rotating within Li Yunmu's abdomen. One after another, strands of azure-colored flux energy flowed into Li Yunmu's body with the rotation of the azure pearl, converging at the tip of the gauntlets. At the same time, Li Yunmu's lower legs were covered by leg guards with azure scales. They were surrounded with azure-colored flux energy, relying on which Li Yunmu was floating above the ground. Azure Dragon World Killing Fist. For the first time, Li Yunmu adorned the 3 pieces of Azure Dragon deity suit and launched an unprecedentedly powerful attack. His fist was directed upwards, towards the heavens. The arm gauntlets filled with azure flux energy which looked like roaring dragons slammed heavily against the final tribulation bolt. At this instant, the heavenly world completely lost its luster with the collision of the two attacks. The fist congealed using azure dragon energy in addition to the heavenly world's world energy was more powerful than anyone could say. Because Li Qinghong and Demon had already been knocked out by the ferocious shockwaves, only Li Yunmu saw how his fist collided with the final tribulation thunderbolt. The heavenly world crumbled apart. As it happened, the only sun turned into pieces under the onslaught of the berserk shockwaves. Li Yunmu relied on the power of the three parts of Azure Dragon deity suit to battle against the punishment of the origin world, and in the end, he successfully resisted the weakest tribulation of the origin world. Soon, the skies cleared up, but he still felt a slight chill in his heart. The system's calculations hadn't been wrong. Relying on all his reserves, he had indeed been able to resist against the world punishment, but he hadn't expected that he would have to pay the price of his heavenly world. For a while, Li Yunmu's mood reached the bottom of a deep abyss. Just when he clenched his teeth and decided to carry out Li Qinghong and Demon to escape the heavenly world, his palm felt warm, and a piece of a snake scale transformed into a ray of light. It shot forward like electricity. This snake scale transformed itself into an extremely enormous shield that seemed to be defending against invisible wind and blended with the crumbling sun. The next instant, a strange thing happened. The sun in front of Li Yunmu's eyes, which seemed unable to persevere, suddenly stabilized. Moreover, it began to emit a brighter glow. As the radiance of the sun fell on the crumbling heavenly world, the enormous cracks which were everywhere were forcefully sealed. The land under Li Yunmu's feet began to expand madly. From original 500-meter perimeter, it suddenly swelled to 600, 700, 1000, 3000, 7000, then 10,000 meters. Only after reaching 10,000 meters did the rapidly expanding ground finally stop. By then, the land had expanded by 20 times compared to its original perimeter. Suddenly, Li Yunmu sensed something and looked upwards. A second grindstone-size sun appeared at the highest point in the sky. Second sun. A second sun had appeared? Without needing to smash countless dimensional stones, it was done by the snake scale which shot out from Li Yunmu's hand. It is the snake scale from goddess Medusa's portrait. Raging waves began to rise in Li Yunmu's heart. At the same time, a hint of understanding also appeared in his mind. He realized that his heavenly world had gained many new abilities because of this transformation, although, for the time being, he didn't know what they were. Without a doubt, things had taken a turn for the better. A very pleasant surprise had happened because he had obtained the snake scale from the portrait of goddess Medusa. Li Yunmu suppressed his shock and immediately asked, "System, what is the current strength of my world power?" "Congratulations host, your heavenly world has been upgraded to the second sun. The amount of world energy you can use is roughly equal to an all-out attack of a late-stage transcendent flux master." System's reply caused Li Yunmu's heart to jolt fiercely. After barely congealing the second sun, Li Yunmu could contend against a late-stage transcendent flux master in the outside world just by relying on his world power. And this was just the second sun. Then what about Xiu whose heavenly world had already congealed 3 suns? What sort of strength would that be? No wonder that woman had been able to clear all the tests at the continental battle with ease. After all, in the entire Earth, how many people would have congealed their third sun before reaching 20 years? Probably even the top powers and clans couldn't accomplish this. Li Yunmu didn't remain dazed for long, quickly sobering up. His gaze fell on the 6 heavily injured ape gods who had managed to remain alive by relying on the deadly spell and their own power. Doesn't this mean that these ape gods have now gained the recognition of the origin world? Moreover, since the world punishment of the origin world had already descended once, it wouldn't appear again, right? Regarding this, Li Yunmu didn't dare to be completely certain. But he had a sensation that given the arrogance of the origin world's will, it wouldn't come again. He became excited, and the next instant, he used the world power to release the 6 ape gods. After which, he slowly restored their vitality. But the tribulation cloud didn't appear. After cautiously waiting for a long while, Li Yunmu finally let go of the worries in his heart. This time's experiment had confirmed his theory. Apparently, as long as the entity didn't surpass Flux Master Layer, it wouldn't attract higher-level world punishment. Since this was the case, he was greatly excited and immediately collected the Void Disc, releasing the restrictions on the 300 ape gods. Good, it is really too good. Li Yunmu couldn't contain his joy. It must be known that this group of ape gods were the basis of his heavenly world's foundation. As long as he passed sufficient cultivation relaying globes to them, they had the potential to cultivate to the Nirvana layer, just one step away from stepping into the Sage layer. If 300 ape gods were nurtured properly, they would become a force which couldn't be ignored. At this time, Li Qinghong and Demon slowly woke up. They hadn't lost consciousness for long, but during that time the heavenly world had undergone a major transformation. It had expanded to a 10,000-meter large area whose end couldn't be seen. Even Flux disciples whose field of vision surpassed that of ordinary people couldn't see 10 kilometers ahead. Moreover, above the heavenly world, the second sun had congealed, which gave an even larger shock to the two people. They weren't aware of what had happened after Li Yunmu's final attack. But when Li Qinghong's gaze fell upon the 300 ape gods, she knew their master's gamble had succeeded. This had indeed been a major gamble, a grand bet. If he lost, then even his heavenly world would have shattered. But if he won, then an even wider world would open in front of them. This would provide Li Yunmu with an even larger capital, unlike before when he looked impressive but had nothing to support his claim. This power was completely separated from the external help provided by battle sages Vega and Anjing. Li Yunmu's harvest from this grand gamble far surpassed his expectations. When he activated the Great Sun Tyrant Body Refining Secrets, the Red Sun which had been previously shattered by tribulation lightning was formed again. But he suddenly discovered that the Red Sun which had formed again also contained the power of thunder. Looking from afar, it appeared like a blazing red-colored ball of thunder. His Great Sun had surprisingly absorbed the tribulation thunder's power of the origin world. Chapter 309, The Difference in the Cultivation Method. Since he didn't know the amount of tribulation lightning of the origin world which had infected his Red Sun for it to change, he opened his mouth slightly and spit out the Thunder Sun once again with some suspicion. What gave him a pleasant surprise was that the tribulation thunder's power hadn't injured his body in the slightest. On the contrary, the thunder flux energy possessed by Li Yunmu was completely absorbed by this Thunder Sun within an instant. Congratulations, host, because of experiencing a coincidental fusing with another type of natural energy, your Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets have successfully transformed into Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets. Congratulations, host, because of a variation produced by unexpectedly absorbing a formidable energy, your Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets have become a cultivation method of unknown grade. Host thus will be unable to use ability points to upgrade the cultivation and can only rely on himself to increase it. The two messages from the system caused Li Yunmu to be both surprised and scared. His mood kept switching between high and low like a roller coaster. What amazed him was that after fusing with the tribulation thunder of the origin world, the Red Sun which he cultivated had surprisingly been upgraded to a level which even the system cannot determine for the time being. However, the disappointment was that after attaining an unknown grade, the energy essence-like ability points were unable to advance it. Frankly speaking, now that the Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Muscle Marrow Secrets could no longer accept the energy essence, it would require even higher level energy essence to advance. At this instant, even Li Yunmu himself didn't know how to describe his feelings. Naturally, he had obtained an enormous fortune, but a hint of discontent still remained in his expression. If the quasi-deities of the earth learned about this, they would probably die because from jealousy. Who could have thought that the path which quasi-deities had been searching using every possible means would be obtained by Li Yunmu because of an accidental fortuitous encounter? System, this unknown profound grade cultivation method, am I really unable to use ability points to upgrade it? Li Yunmu still wasn't willing to give up. Yes, host. Ability points are unable to satisfy its cultivation grade. Only when the system is upgraded to the 10th level will it be able to produce higher level energy essences which could assist in upgrading it. As for the level of this profound cultivation method, the system can see one difference between this cultivation method and sage level cultivation methods, and that is the difference of source energy. As system kept explaining, Li Yunmu slowly gained a little understanding. According to the traditional energy system, A-grade cultivation methods represented the highest grade cultivation methods for the 5th dimension, and S-grade represented the 6th dimension's flux master level cultivation methods, while SS-grade represented the 7th dimension's sage level cultivation methods. As for SSS grade, it represented the peak supreme sage level cultivation methods which could be accessed by humanity. By then, Li Yunmu himself only cultivated 2 SSS Supreme Sage grade cultivation methods, which were ghostly image substitution and plant essence innate healing reversal. Apart from these 2 cultivation methods, even Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets didn't reach the Supreme Sage level. But the current situation was different, because he had fused with a formidable destructive power like the Tribulation Thunder of the Origin World. The original Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets had been forcibly upgraded to Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets, which was a profound cultivation method of unknown grade. As for the difference between the two, that was similar to a difference between heaven and earth, because with source energy of a different level, the cultivation results would be different from traditional cultivation methods. Li Yunmu faintly sensed that he had barely entered the first level of this upgraded Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets. The highest level also wasn't similar to that of the SSS grade cultivation methods which had more than 100 levels. This one had only 12 layers. The original foundation of the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets only formed the first level of this upgraded cultivation method and nothing more. Because of the Tribulation Thunder of the Origin World, there was an earth-shattering quality change in the cultivation method. If previously the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets used Great Sun as its focus, Tyrant Body as the secondary, and Muscle Marrow Secrets as tertiary, then now it was all reversed. The Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets used Muscle Marrow as the primary, Thunder as the secondary, and the strength of Tyrant Body formed after marrow cleansing as the foundation to increase the strength of his Red Sun to a terrifying level. As long as any smart person carefully thought about this, they would realize that the core function of the Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets was still to cultivate the Red Sun as the core. Whether it was Muscle Marrow Cleansing or Tribulation Thunder or Tyrant Body, all of them were there to provide assistance to the Red Sun. But the change in priorities in other aspects had certainly increased the importance of Muscle Marrow Secrets. The cultivation method used thunder to temper the corporeal body to make sure Tyrant Body became even more terrifying to hold the extremely terrifying Red Sun. In simple terms, Li Yunmu's corporeal body was like a container to hold water. The more formidable his body was, the more water it could hold. Good God, this really is too difficult. After a lot of time, Li Yunmu had finally gotten his hands on a profound cultivation method which could be compared to a supreme sage level cultivation methods, but he still sighed in his heart. Despite that, he was extremely excited after learning about this profound cultivation method. The next instant, he tried to comprehend the cultivation path and activated the cultivation method. Instantly, the Red Sun in his navel released numerous warm currents which then filled his entire body with extremely comfortable sensation. At the same time, the thunder around his Red Sun quickly transformed into thunder energy and began to continuously move along the paths connecting his 72 flux points. This thunder energy was the purest and most supreme grindstone. At the outer edge of this thunder energy, the thunder loudly rumbled and slowly began to spread along Li Yunmu's body. In an instant, he was left completely stunned. When he moved this thunder energy along the circuit connecting his 72 flux points, he could clearly sense that whether it was the original flux points or the meridians connecting them, all of them began to expand. He could feel all of it with crystal clearness. Chapter 310, Improvement. Expanding? That's right, they were expanding. In simple terms, the flux points were expanding and so were the meridians. However, when the warm current from the red sun flowed through them, these expanding flux points and meridians seemed to have become even firmer and tougher. What is going on here? How is it possible? How can the opened flux points and meridians still expand? What sort of trick is this? Li Yunmu was extremely astonished in his heart. What is the meaning of this? Even if he wasn't completely clear about it, but even an ordinary person could understand that if circulating this cultivation method once could slightly expand the flux points and meridians, then after accumulating over many days and months, this small difference would become very large. It must be known that Li Yunmu had never heard of this sort of cultivation method which could expand one's flux points and meridians in the fluxer community in his earth. Unprecedented. Instantly, he thought of one important point. Don't tell me? Yes, according to the system's analysis, this is the reason why Earth's quasi-deities have been unable to enter the realm of deities. They think that it is because they have been trapped in this natural prison and are unable to escape Earth, but their thinking is actually skewed. We have also thought wrong. The real reason as to why they haven't entered the deity realm, according to the current analysis, is because there aren't any cultivation methods on Earth which can expand their flux points and meridians. From the time they began cultivating, they have never improved their foundation. And because it is insufficient, it is foreordained that Earth's quasi-deities, regardless of their power or talent, will eternally remain unable to enter the deity realm. The conclusion by the system was extremely shocking. If Li Yunmu hadn't personally experienced the changes in his body, hadn't noticed his flux points as well as meridians expanding and strengthening, then being a native of his Earth, he would probably be the first one to deny the system's conclusion. No one could easily believe the words said by the system. This is really too unimaginable. Usually, the true facts are lamentably ridiculous like this. But why had no one ever thought of creating a cultivation method which could expand their flux points and strengthen their meridians? For a while, Li Yunmu was unable to make sense of his situation. It was impossible that all the elders of his Earth could have been so muddle-headed. Host may not known that the flux points and the meridians of the natives of this origin world have much times greater potential compared to people of our Earth. This sort of innate difference directly decides the upper bound for humans. After this, the system turned silent for a long time, seemingly trying to find the root cause of all this. Are you saying that it is because of the gravity? That's right. The gravity of the origin world far surpasses that of our Earth, so the innate constitution of the native people here as well as their future growth is much greater. Because of it, the potential of their flux points is also a level beyond. It is possible that it is not that the quasi-deities hadn't thought of expanding their flux points, but rather that they have already researched this sort of foundational method to the peak. As for building an even stronger foundation, that is limited by the body constitutions of the people of our Earth. Then how can we explain the upper limit of the innate constitution of our people? What if we first cultivated our body to the peak in the same environment as the origin world? Li Yunmu hastily asked. According to the analysis, even if the people of Earth strengthened their corporeal body to the level of the natives of origin world, it would still be impossible for them to attain the potential of natives. System gave another psychological blow to Li Yunmu, but it had no other option besides putting an end to his thoughts. Why? Because the people of Earth cannot start cultivating from the time they are in the fetus. Moreover, the body of the mother from our Earth cannot achieve the standards of native people of the origin world. As if a thunderstorm had come on a sunny day, Li Yunmu ate one shocking news after another. He became slightly clearer about the system's words that they had already lost at the starting point by losing the innate advantages. The genes of ancestors as well as a mother's body constitution resulted in the infants developing different body essence and constitution. Him trying to rely on formidable power in the future to temper his body in an attempt to battle this disparity was just a pipe dream. Perhaps Li Yunmyo could temper his body to become even more formidable than those of the natives, but his innate genes and body composition had been finalized long ago. Regardless of whatever he tried, he could never change that. Then you mean that even if I possess this great sun thunder tyrant body muscle marrow secrets and expand my flux points as well as meridians, I still won't be able to achieve the peak potential like the natives who are born with it and will never be able to enter the deity realm? Li Yunmyo asked with a heavy heart. Theoretically, yes, the system replied with absolute certainty. In its opinion, the life forms of the two planes with comparatively large differences between them naturally couldn't become identical. However, the system didn't declare it to be a fact, because it knew that it would fill the host with despair. Theoretically. However, Li Yunmyo's personality was completely different from those of others. He was different from other people of his earth, since he possessed the system which had formidable deduction and calculation abilities as well as a heavenly world. Just this alone made sure that his future path to the ultimate peak wasn't completely severed. He then suddenly realized something. System, you are wrong. If things really couldn't be changed, then the quasi-deities of the earth wouldn't have found agents to descend into the origin world. Perhaps because of the circumstances, the quasi-deities were innately defected and would remain unable to become deities, but that didn't mean that this group of people which stood at the top of world were completely without ideas. Li Yunmyo didn't dare doubt the wisdom and ability of people which stood above hundreds of millions of any plane. Since the quasi-deities had acted in this way, then it was clear that this innate deficiency could be corrected. Otherwise, quasi-deities wouldn't have went to search for representatives to descend to the origin world and just given up. Maybe, just as you think, the information obtained by us is incomplete. That it is not impossible. Every deduction may be wrong because the information we possess is limited. System didn't refute his idea. The outline of this concept became more and more clear in Li Yunmyo's mind. He knew that regardless of whether he obtained the opportunity or not, if the descenders from his earth wanted to break through to the deity realm, they would certainly have to fulfill a strict condition, which was that they must possess a cultivation method which could strengthen and expand their flux points as well as meridians. And presently, he was extremely fortunate to have obtained one such cultivation method. According to Li Yunmyo's deduction, the first step was to cultivate this method. And then, in the future, as long as he obtained another chance to complement the innate disparity, it would settle everything. Thus, the value of the great sun thunder tyrant body muscle marrow secrets had been completely changed in his mind. This was definitely a cultivation method which was extremely important. Fortunately, he had already reached its first layer. When he cultivated, he could only make 12 rotations at the maximum. After 2 hours had passed, he circulated the technique 12 times. When he tried to cultivate further, he suddenly discovered that regardless of whether it was his meridians or flux points, a sensation of burning pain rose from them. Warning: host shouldn't proceed with cultivating. If you forcefully cultivate further, your flux points and meridians will rupture. Although the system couldn't offer higher level energy essence to upgrade the cultivation of this profound method, it could still monitor Li Yunmyo's cultivation situation. After all, when all was said and done, the Great Sun Thunder Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets was just a variation of Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets. After rotating the thunder energy 12 times through the flux points, Li Yunmyo felt a profound difference. He could sense that his 72 flux points, which were fully saturated with flux energy previously, could again absorb flux energy. This was a difference, a small one, but a difference. Just after cultivating for 1 day, he could already see the difference. From this, it could be clearly deduced that even if the flux experts of this world were on the same level as the descenders, there was a large disparity in their combat strengths. As for how large was this disparity exactly, he had yet to find out. He now wished to meet with a flux expert of this origin world, hoping to test the limit of the opponent's power.